Please stand by. We're about to begin. Good day and welcome to today's The State of Electricity Ohio webinar. Today's call is being recorded. All audience lines will be in a listen-only mode during the program. However, you are encouraged to submit questions throughout the conference. Simply type your question in the Ask a Question box located at the bottom left portion of your screen. Then click the Submit button. Our speakers will address your questions at the end of the program as time permits. If you are having any technical difficulties with today's presentation, please select the Help button at the bottom of the screen for an event help guide. You may download the slides at any time by clicking the Download Presentation button at the bottom of the screen. Also, a link to the recorded presentation will be sent to you via email after the webinar. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I'd like to turn the call over to David Braun. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is David Braun, and I'm the Regional Vice President of Sales in the Midwest for GDF Suez Energy Resources. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to GDF Suez webinar, The State of Electricity in Ohio, with speakers Brooke Ramsey, Mike Petrini, and myself. Brooke is the Regional Sales Director for GDF Suez, and Mike is the Manager of Supply. We will conclude the webinar with a question and answer session. So as the operator just said, if you have questions over the course of the presentation, please type them into the Q&A space on the website, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation as time allows. And as she noted, please note that today's web conference is being recorded, and we'll get an email out in the next couple of weeks with a link to that recording if you want to come back and listen to the content again. We have a diverse audience this morning in this webinar. Participants include energy buyers from small businesses all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. Additionally, we have many third-party consultants and brokers on the line with us today. So I'd like to begin now. Ginger, if you could flip to the next page, we'll go to the agenda. As you can see on the agenda slide, let's talk briefly about the company, a little advertisement, got to pay for the time, introduce who we are, and then move right into talking about energy cost components, what's moving the price of electricity right now, and some of the details then around things like capacity, transmission, ancillaries in general, and then move to a more specific discussion addressing Duke and AEP utility territories in Ohio. And then we'll finish up with a talk about product structures and some conclusions, and then move to our question and answer segment. So next slide, please. Today's speakers, by way of introduction, as I said, I'm David Braun. I am responsible for sales in the Midwest, and I've been here with the company for 6 years now, managing sales in PJM as well as Midwest ISO, and had several prior stops before this in my 23 years. Brooke Ramsey is our Director of Sales in Ohio. He joined the company last fall as we continue to expand our Ohio presence. Brooke has over 25 years of energy and commodity sales, including some very early stops at Access Energy, Enron, UGI Gas, and then for the past 8 to 10 years with Fifth Third Bank, where he helped their banking clients manage commodity risk exposure. And so he brings quite a wealth of both energy experience as well as experience in other commodity risk management areas, and we're very glad to have him as part of our team here in Ohio. Lastly, Mike Petrini, who is our Manager of Portfolio Management. His group is responsible for managing the company's risk positions, hedging our energy and other positions for PJM and Midwest ISO, as well as setting the curves used in costing all of our energy and non-energy components. So it's a very key part of our pricing and our billing on an ongoing basis. Mike's been with us for 3 years and has experience from Fulcrum Power and Dynegy. And so he's a very valued part of our team, and we're glad to have him here on the call today and bring his expertise to everyone. Next slide, please. So just by quick way of introduction to the company, I like to often jokingly say we're one of the largest companies most people haven't heard of. Globally, GDF Suez, which is based in France and Belgium, has energy, both gas and power utilities across the world, as well as a strong presence in environmental services It's a very large corporation with over 200,000 employees, $117 billion in revenues last year, and leads in many areas, especially around social responsibility, environmental areas, and we're also the leading independent power producer in the world with over 100,000 megawatts of generation on every continent but Antarctica. What that means to an American customer, an American C&I customer in particular, which is what we care about here, is the corporation carries an A credit rating from S&P, which means we're here to stand behind our contracts, and the corporation has a very conservative financial approach to the business. We're almost always a hedger, not a speculator, so our positions are covered. We're not, you don't have to worry about your supplier blowing up at some point in the future because market costs get out of line. Also, the company is very old. Its roots go all the way back to 1822. Part of the company did dig the Suez Canal in the 1850s. So as you can see, it's a very old corporation. What we do here in North America, we do power generation, about 15,000 megawatts of generation across the U.S. Most of that is natural gas-fired. There is a portion that's renewable, both solar and wind. We also have hydro operations in the Northeast as well. Locally in Ohio, our supply is backed by 625 megawatts of gas-fired generation within the state of Ohio. The business that we're in is large commercial and industrial electricity service in competitive markets. And you can see the states where we are serving customers. And Ohio is our most recent addition. We came to Ohio a few years ago, first in the FirstEnergy and Dayton territories, and now we're getting into AEP and Duke here right now. So we're the fifth largest C&I supplier in the country, serving about 8,000 megawatts, actually more than 8,000 megawatts of total U.S. retail load and about 83,000 customers. So while it's a very large global corporation, we do have the local presence and the expertise with people like Brooke Ramsey on the ground in all of the markets that we serve to be able to work with you very closely and personally on a localized level, but still backed by a major corporation. So we hope you give us a chance the next time you are shopping for your electricity needs. Moving on to the next slide, getting into the content for today. A lot of what we're going to talk about, at least in the early part of this discussion, involves the cost structures in the PJM interconnection area. As most of you probably know, Congress back in the 90s ordered various regional transmission or interstate transmission operators to be set up to operate the wholesale grid across the country. And PJM is the operator for the Mid-Atlantic out through Ohio and into the Midwest. And so its role is really one of reliability and safety of the high voltage transmission system, as well as allowing guaranteeing open access to that transmission system for customers and independent power generators. They don't own any assets, but they do control the access and operation of the high voltage system, as well as dispatching power generation across the footprint that you see on the screen here. And as a part of that, they're also running power markets, both day-ahead and real-time hourly markets, in addition to forward markets for capacity, as you'll hear more about today, and various markets for ancillaries and other services. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is the tariffs and the rules and regulations around PJM, because it's really what affects the supply that competitive retail energy suppliers such as GDF Suez have to work through. So with that, I will turn it over to Brooke Ramsey to begin to talk to you about some of these cost components and how they affect you in Ohio. So if we can move to the next slide, and Brooke, turn it over to you.
Thanks, David, and thanks to all of you for tuning in, not just as fellow Buckeyes here in Ohio, but we have many states being represented today with folks with a lot of interest in Ohio, and we do appreciate your time. On this slide, let's talk about electricity cost components, and there's two basic building blocks of energy. There's the energy component, and then the delivery or distribution of that energy. And, energy in its purest sense, we think of it as the supply of kilowatt hours through the meter, and that includes 4 variables: generation, transmission, congestion, and then losses. And cost is much more manageable in this energy area than the delivery component. And delivery includes items that are primarily set by PJM in Ohio, or tariff-based or regulatory in nature. And items in this category include really 3 variables: capacity, transmission, and ancillaries. And under delivery, customers are, quite frankly, price takers, and events and costs are less manageable than in the energy phase. On slide 8, continuing on our journey on energy today, we'll learn that there are actually 26 PJM pricing components that make up the cost of power. We'll be discussing these components in 4 main buckets to clarify for you in terms of where they fit in the pyramid. And this representation we're working through today is really an approximation of cost components based from our PJM experience, and really should not be considered as absolute percentages, and also taxes are not included. But let's look at that first energy component. As you can see in the pyramid, it is the lower portion noted in red, and it comprises 75 to 80% of the total energy package. And those wavy lines you see are really expressing the volatility of each component. Now let's look at the volatility associated with this energy portion by starting with a review of the 4 bucket components that comprise power prices. And on to slide 9, in that first bucket of energy, we define the published value of energy at a central and liquid trading point, AEP Dayton hub, by example. And hubs are not physical locations, but rather an arithmetic average of the price of a set of predefined generation nodes, if you will. And the purpose is really a reflection of the merit order of value of generation at a liquid location for a specified time period. A lot of verbiage there. But the certainty is good. Hub contracts are traded OTC over the counter via NYMEX ICE trading platform, and supply can hedge on behalf of the customer, or customer floats on day ahead or around the clock RTC index. Then we have zonal basis. Zonal basis is really the price differential between the price at the hub and the price at the zone, aka congestion. And it really accounts for the value difference between the hub and the zone and enables hedging of that differential. Liquidity varies by the zone, but in all cases, that bid-ask spread, or the purchase or sale cover, is greater than hub energy. Primary hedging instruments are swaps and FTRs. Shape is the next energy component, and it's really just the cost to serve a customer's load shape relative to a flat RTC block, round-the-clock block. And it accurately reflects the value of customers' unique load shape. So, when we review pricing structure and look at load shape, we compare that to a flat RTC block to obtain the value. On a straddle, next energy component is really the risk premium associated with swing provisions, the volumetric swing provision of the contract, like full requirements versus a tolerance band versus material adverse change. All you power buyers out there certainly know what that's all about. And then it's really the premium is to cover that risk of the actual load price shape, that it may vary from the historical load and price shape in the pricing case. And imbalance is the next energy component, and it really covers the risk of price and load changes between day-ahead schedules and market price and real-time actual hourly use of market prices. And that premium it covers the risk that suppliers are more likely to be short in high real-time price environments and then long in soft real-time price environments. And then we see losses, the final energy component, and that's defined as the cost of energy that's lost due to resistance in transmission and distribution lines. It really just covers the cost of the additional energy that load-serving entities are required to supply to the grid, and that overcomes the resistance in the wires. So, it's easily defined as it takes energy to move energy. On slide 10, when reviewing the volatility of hourly pricing, we asked a simple question: what moves power prices? And really, you can define it in two facets: supply factors, supply side, and then demand factors, or demand side. And some of the supply factors may be a new source discovery and development. Storage levels, of course, power can't be stored, but natural gas can. And just a side note, this morning we showed a 95 BCF injection, market expected 89. Storage levels are 17% lower than last year, but that was a record year. And we're only about 1% below the 5-year, so we think we're going to see that margin close here shortly. Power yesterday closed up. Obama, possibly it was the reaction to carbon limits on the Obama stage. And then, there can be international political situations and uncertainty that would affect the supply side. And then on demand factors, economic activity, growth or recession, conservation efforts, and weather. Some key analysts feel the market could be headed for an inflection point later this year. That can lead to higher gas prices and power prices for the next 2 to 3 years. Issues that could play a part pushing it higher are LNG exports, likely to start by the end of 2015. Increasing industrial demand due to low energy prices can put pressure on gas and power. Increasing retirements of coal plants, especially in this region, due to tightening EPA regulations, can drive up natural gas demand. And crude oil prices may get some pressure to head lower due to the overabundance coming from the shale plays. That can drive down crude prices, which will lead to decreased drilling in the U.S. And decreased drilling for oil means less gas is extracted as a byproduct, and that puts less gas in the market. However, we still have an abundance of coal, and even with additional retirements, we're going to continue to have a large share of power production from coal. We also have an enormous amount of coal supply in this country. Coal will certainly still compete against gas, which is going to keep a cap on gas prices. But as we know, if gas gets too expensive, coal takes over again, and that dramatically decreases daily gas demand for power gen. I believe on slide 11, this is a slide that always intrigues me, the tight correlation or following of natural gas and electricity. And one of the key reasons power prices follow nat gas is based from gas being a clear choice for meeting peak load demand by producers, power producers. And when it's plotted together, electricity prices and natural gas prices seem to track closely, and the reality is that they are closely related and are generally strongly correlated. Natural gas-fired generating units are usually the marginal units called upon by the grid operators, and as such, they tend to set pricing in the wholesale markets. So generally in the Midwest, as natural prices go, so go electricity prices. So given electricity prices and natural gas prices tend to move together, we hope that your power supplier is monitoring this relationship between the two and keeping you in tune to opportunities. Moving on to slide 12, I'm going to next hand over the reins to Mike Caprini for a conversation on capacity coverage on, I believe, slides 12 through 16. Mike?
Thank you, Brooke. Now that we've reviewed some of the commodity costs, the raw energy costs to bring you the power, let's talk about some of the delivery aspects of providing you power for our users. So one of the things that is often discussed in the delivery costs is the capacity component. Basically, capacity is the ability to provide reliable power resources to meet peak demand when called upon. So this is essential to a functioning market to prevent items like that we would never want to see, like blackouts. So what the PJM Regional Transmission Organization does is conducts a market to make sure that there are adequate reserves to meet peak demand, especially during, of course, the summer when demand gets very, very high to serve load. So one of the cost components of that capacity in your total bill is probably about 15%. Now it will vary over time depending on the clearing of the capacity prices, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but on average it's been about 15%. Again, this is an estimate as mentioned earlier in the presentation. So in response to cash flow, so how does this money, this capacity, essentially a capacity product that's created through generators and load, how does this cash flow move? So this is essentially an availability payment made to generation by load-serving entities to essentially compensate them for items like their fixed plant and equipment costs. So the intent of the whole capacity construct is to incentivize new generation and ensure that PJM maintains an adequate reserve margin to maintain the grid. So when I say reserve margin to maintain the grid, that's essentially a percentage of oversupply to the demand that's expected. That's the reserve component that we talk about, so that there's adequate generation resources to meet peak demand. So capacity is run in what's called the reliability pricing model. That is the technical name that you may hear from time to time if you in relation to PJM as to the capacity construct that's created. Now PJM of course does not own generation assets. It's just conducting a market between asset owners and suppliers and end users to facilitate those payments across the marketplace. So how does PJM do this? They do this through an annual auction. And we'll go through that in the next slide. You'll see that in just a second. But the prices are set 3 years forward to give generation developers an incentive or a price signal of what the supply-demand balance is looking like in certain localities. And we'll talk about the Ohio localities in just a moment. And it gives an idea of how that target reserve margin is looking going forward, so to incentivize that new generation. So let's look at some of the actual clearing prices. Now, I wanted to draw your attention to the very last planning year column of 16-17. This was the most recent auction that cleared. I believe it cleared in May, and our capacity auctions in PJM do clear in May, and they run for a capability year or a planning year. You'll notice the letters PY from June through May. And during the June through May time frame, that is the capacity price that is charged to a supplier by PJM. Now, of course, some participants, some load chooses to lock in capacity. Others choose to pass it through, depending on an individual's preference. So one thing I wanted to point out in these graphs is you'll notice that a lot of the numbers for the planning years are quite the same. That's because in the Midwest, capacity prices tend to reflect the RTO, which is the regional transmission as a whole. And so they will be very, very tightly coordinated, very highly related and correlated, with the exception recently we had last year in the ATSI territory, which is its own separate pocket of capacity for reliability purposes. There was a lot of generation retirements due to new environmental regulations, and also there was a reduced ability to import power into that area of Ohio during that planning year. You'll notice that it dropped off substantially in this last auction from $294 per megawatt day to $90 per megawatt day, in large part due to additional capacity coming online and, more, just as important, transmission upgrades in and around ATSI that would allow more capacity to be imported into that area. And below the chart, you see just kind of on a dollar per megawatt hour a figure what that kind of cost would look like on a 60% load factor meter. So turning on to a little bit more of this. So how is your cost actually calculated? That's one of the things that we'll speak to. And basically, each meter that's under your company's agreement is assessed a slice of the peak load. That peak load is based on the 5 top demand points within the PJM system, usually in June, July, August, around that time frame, of when the system is using the most power. Then your particular meter will be assessed as a slice of that usage. That is the PLC tag. Then there are additional scaling factors that are set in place from the time that the 3-year delivery window is set until the period of delivery. And those are called scaling factors. And part of it is that reserve component I talked about earlier to provide reliability and security, as David had mentioned, to the PJM footprint. So we take this is our total obligation. This PLC tag times the scaling factors is essentially the capacity obligation. That is then multiplied by the RPM rate and the number of days in the month to come up with your capacity cost. Down below, I've represented the AEP and Duke areas where we are fairly new to, and what those capacity costs have been in the past, and going into the future as well. I'd like to turn it over now to Dave, who will talk to you a little bit more about transmission. Thanks, Dave.
Great, thank you, Mike. Next couple sections that we're going to talk about are additional areas where the customers are price takers. We don't have a lot of control over these rates, and so that's going to be the transmission and the ancillary sections. So moving on to the next slide. Transmission is a cost component that pays for the bulk transmission system moving power between utilities and between states. So these are the high tension lines, high voltage lines you see hanging from the big steel towers and big steel poles across the countryside. So this is a FERC regulated tariff called Network Integrated Transmission Service. And Ohio has a couple of unique aspects to this, and the biggest one you need to be aware of is that in AEP and Dayton Power and Light territories, this NITS charge is something that has to be paid by the CRES suppliers, so the retail suppliers or the load-serving entities. So it's something that if you're in those areas, you need to understand how your supplier is accounting for those and charging you for those, whether it's going to be fixed in your rate or your adder if it's an index product, or if it's something that will be a pass-through. You can see these charges are not small. It's about $5 a megawatt hour, or 5 mils in AEP, and about half that size in Dayton. But on the other hand, FirstEnergy utility territories, so Toledo Edison, Cleveland Electric Illuminating, and Ohio Edison, which make up the ATSI transmission area, and the Duke area down in Cincinnati, the NITS is collected by the utilities on their distribution bills, and so it's considered a non-bypassable. So it's, in those areas, you don't need to worry about how your supplier is handling it. So it's kind of a unique aspect. And there's a couple other ones I'll talk about in a second, similar to that in ancillaries. From a cost perspective, similar to capacity that Mike just talked about, for transmission, customers are paid really on a ratchet demand basis based on a transmission tag that's set annually. And this is set based on a calendar year, and it's enforced for a calendar year. And that value is a demand value that is set based on what your usage is, your demand is for the hour that the utility area that you're in has peaked. So instead of the capacity piece, which is an average of what you used in the 5 highest hours that all of PJM peaked, the transmission tag or transmission PLC is just the single hour that your utility zone peaked for the year. So it will be typically a different value than what you have for capacity, and sometimes it's a pretty significantly different value, especially if you're an industrial that has a widely varying operation like a steel mill with an electric arc furnace, something like that. So similar to capacity here, to calculate a cost on transmission, you're going to have the transmission tag times the NITS rate for your utility zone times the number of days in the billing cycle to divide that out to a number of days in the billing cycle. So that's the charge. So if you can either take that as a pass-through, as we'll discuss later, or fixed into your transmission. I'm sorry, into your fixed pricing. Next slide, please. So this slide, a little more specifically again about Ohio. And some of the differences we see between the utilities here. Again, in the FirstEnergy territories of the ATSI zone, network integrated transmission, or NITS, transmission enhancement, reactive supply and voltage, and transmission owner scheduling and RMR, the last four being what we consider ancillary services, are all things that are collected by the utility as non-bypassables. Same thing in Duke. However, AEP and Dayton, those charges are the responsibility of the CREST supplier, and therefore you need to understand how your supplier is accounting for those, whether they're fixed or not, whether they may be fixed but could be subject to change if the cost changes in the future. But that's, I would say, particularly concerning for you for RMR, which is generation deactivation, and transmission enhancement. Transmission enhancement goes to pay for transmission assets that are still in development and not rolled into the rate base yet. And RMR is a charge that gets assessed if a retiring generator has to stay on beyond its retirement date for reliability reasons. And we've seen that lately in the FirstEnergy territories because of all of the coal plant retirements that have been scheduled and proposed lately up in that territory, as Mike spoke of a few minutes ago in regard to capacity as well. So those are charges that typically, the RMR is typically zero, and a lot of suppliers will say, oh yeah, we're including it, don't worry about it, and they include it at zero, but then as soon as a charge pops up, they call change in law. So just be aware of how that's handled by different suppliers. We don't like to play games. We like to be transparent. So RMR is something that we hold outside and just say that's a pass-through. If any charges do come into play, assigned by FERC and PJM for a particular region, we're just going to pass those through at cost, and we don't try to play games on what's fixed and not fixed for that. But as I said before, you need to be aware, based on the different utility zones in Ohio, what of these costs are included and not included in the non-bypassables, and which ones are the responsibility of your retail supplier. Moving to the next slide, I've already talked a lot about some of the ancillaries, but just kind of rounding out our pyramid here, the ancillary services are typically $2 to $4 a megawatt hour, so about 5% of your bill, depending on where you are and what's non-bypassable versus bypassable. And basically what these charges are other things that PJM has to acquire and pay for to keep the system operating reliability. So it's things like voltage control and frequency control and other things that if someone wasn't monitoring and flexing generation or other supplies to take care of, the grid would not be reliable and ultimately spin out of control. So these are minor costs, but things that we have to pay for, and things that you need to be concerned about as to whether they're included or not included in your supplier charges. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brooke to talk more specifically about some of the issues in Ohio. Brooke?
Thanks, David. I'm going to pick back up on regulatory slide number 22 and cover two major utility territories, one called in Ohio, one called Duke and one called AEP, and then talk a little bit about risk-reward on 26, and then some products that we see a lot of activity on slide 27. The first of four regulatory topics that we chose just to brief you on, the PUCO has an investigation concerning the retail market in Ohio, and the Commission has asked a number of questions about how the retail market is developing in Ohio. And has also made this proceeding a forum for suggested changes to the Commission rules, which should enhance the retail market. The Commission set 6 workshop meetings to address these issues. The first workshop was June 25th, just this past Tuesday, and you can contact the PUCO for those other dates. Next, we'll call it the restructuring of AEP. AEP Ohio, in the span of 3 years, will transfer all the Ohio Power owned, and with some units located outside of Ohio, utility dedicated gen units to a separate non-regulated subsidiary. This is pretty key. AEP will supply energy acquired via a public competitive auction for standard service customers in 2014, and then starting in June 15, supply both energy and capacity for standard service customers via an auction. So instead of legacy company-owned generation, AEP, Duke, Dayton will still have generation within the utility. AEP will separate in 2015. So we've already said that AEP will charge a capacity rate based upon PJM capacity auction results, not legacy-owned generation. So the plan is that AEP Ohio will be permitted to set up a deferral account to track the difference between what it collects for capacity at PJM capacity auction prices and a capacity price of $188.88 per megawatt day. The state Supreme Court appeals are pending on this. And just a note on FERC 745, this FERC order established charges to load-serving entities, LESs or LSEs, to pay for certain demand response-related ISO costs. And this has brought about the advent of some suppliers passing through 745 charges, but not always. So adds a little bit more to the confusion on what to look for on your structure. Next on slides 23 and 24, let's chat a little bit about 2 of the reasons that I was hired, the utility markets of AEP and Duke. I'm excited to bring our global powerhouse, as David, I think, referred to it earlier, to my home state in Columbus and Cincinnati markets. In AEP, Ohio, we, GDF Suez, are entering this market officially this summer within a few weeks and are very excited to offer what we think is a different approach to power solutions. This is a market marked by change, if you will, and one that prior to 2011 generally had very low utility charges, and therefore little switching took place behind AEP. It really primarily serves Columbus, Findlay, Canton, and a few other Central Ohio communities. And as noted, AEP will separate its generation from Ohio utilities by 2015. Just a little bit about Duke on slide 24. A beautiful part of the state of Ohio, Cincinnati and surrounding areas. Duke transferred from the Midwest ISO to PJM in Jan 2012. Significant switching took place, and there's good headroom and savings opportunities for customers. Many have already switched from utility supplies, but again, we're excited to bring a different view to securing supplies behind Duke as well as AEP. And as of last week, we are now live behind this part of the state. So just a few notable issues. Duke's utility generation continues to supply capacity to the territory. Customers that switch to an alternative supplier continue to have a non-bypassable charge for gen under rider ESSC. And Duke invoices for transmission and certain non-market-based ancillaries. And we've attached a link there for a good map overview of the territory. On to slide 25. Now one of my favorite slides that clients seem to really appreciate once we walk through it and they think deeply about their own set of variables on determining the ultimate power product that may be right for them. We've developed this tool to really help the customer understand the risk-reward spectrum. And again, that's called risk-reward. This graph can be really helpful in identifying your tolerance for risk, highlighting the risk premiums that are associated with minimizing that risk, and then ultimately helping you to choose that energy product that really best meets your company's needs. If you look on the vertical axis, it shows a range of possible outcomes. You'll notice the narrower the cone, the smaller the possible range of those outcomes is. The wider the cone, the broader range of outcomes. That horizontal axis, you see, corresponds to families of, we'll call them energy products, with more components fixed to the left. and a mixture of fixed and floating or index components toward the center. Then you see more floating components to the right. You'll also notice those wavy lines again. Those correspond to the overall price volatility. So as you move to the left toward more fixed pricing, the potential price volatility decreases. The next item to discuss is the risk premium dotted line that goes from the top left part of the graph to the bottom right. And as with any product that you purchase and you have delivered over a prolonged period of time, there's a risk premium that is included in the cost of that item. So you'll notice that the risk premium for a fully fixed price contract is high and starts to drop off once a customer moves towards more of a flex or a float product. And the reason this happens is that for a fully fixed product, a supplier has to evaluate the markets for all the components making up that product and then secure contracts to provide the product at that same price for the life of the contract you want, even though the markets will fluctuate in the future or charge a premium to take on that risk themselves. Risk premiums are embedded in the overall price by all suppliers. So it's important to understand what you are fixing and what you are allowing to float. I can't say that enough. Compare and contrast on the fixed versus float all you can. On the far left of that chart, you'll notice the blue cone extends beyond the vertical axis. What we're trying to demonstrate there is that there are certain components of an energy product that the prices are determined by state regulatory bodies or by the ISO, and they're beyond our control for any energy supplier. In other instances, certain energy components are so illiquid that they can't be accurately hedged by any supplier. But as you move toward the right of the graph, you'll notice that the risk premium line starts to move down, or in effect is reduced. So by example, I have a client who locks a fixed price with all or most of the components at a stipulated price, and they're going to have a higher risk premium associated with providing them that greater degree of price stability. On the other hand, for the flex or float product families, there are fewer components to be fixed, fewer risk premiums. So if you're a customer who can wear a little risk associated with certain energy components, you're going to have fewer risk premiums, but you are subject to a wider range of energy costs. And if we move on to slide 26, it kind of plays into this. The slide depicts what we'll call a bottoms-up approach, and we're kind of aligning products with the amount of risk premiums or risk transfer. Again, the energy structure in red on the bottom can be managed through many products that you and I can control, unlike the top of the pyramid where we have less say and are really price takers. But we need to be aware of what the supplier has included or passed through in the price adder. GDF Suez, we pride ourselves on transparent pricing. We indicate very clearly on the proposal what components are fixed and what may be floating. So the first box, including the pass-through adders, capacity, transmission, ancillaries, line loss, taxes, are the must-take, but must identify, they need to be identified components from the supplier. The second box, the energy structure itself, is, I'll call it our arsenal of weapons against the market that are hedgeable. We can also control the amount of premium by the action of that product. Meaning the more we let the market dictate our direction, the less risk premium the supplier must apply. And to illustrate an example of that, on the next slide we cover a popular product amongst a few of our mid-sized to large industrial energy users, which is a block and index product on slide 27. And this product lies somewhat in the middle on the risk parameters and gives our clients control over what and how much and at what price level the buyer is interested in by securing blocks of energy. The energy cost is variable, changes hourly, and it's indexed to zonal prices posted by PJM. You have a choice of day-ahead or real-time prices. Then we secure blocks by fixing a portion of the load, kind of a base load, if you will. And the options are peak, off-peak, and we need a minimum of 1 month to do this. But we build a portfolio of hedges for you that are really dollar cost averaging, much like your 401k can be compared to. The nice thing is the index portion, you're not paying any forward risk premiums for this. You avoid load shaping and load following risk premiums. And, what's really key is you're not making the bet that today is the best day to buy power, which, you can find fault with a lot of RFPs that decide on next Thursday we're gonna do this thing regardless of where the market is. Well, this gives you that option to avoid that must-take decision, and you can take advantage of declining power prices, and we set triggers and lock those as they hit. Of course, the risk to that is the market runs up before you hedge, but we mitigate that by having a plan and we stick to it. So I can't emphasize enough. We think we have a clean approach to the market. We sit down and everyone's risk reward is different, I'm just excited to bring that product to these marketplaces, and it's been a lot of fun. So I think I'm going to hand over back to David, who will pick up on slide 28 on maybe some product conclusions and a little bit of a brief summary to close, and that's all I've got. Thank you, David.
Good. Thank you, Brooke. We've got about 14 minutes left, so I'm going to move through these last couple slides quickly so that we can get to the number of questions that we have already asked. So just in conclusion, one thing we wanted to point out with the product discussion we just had was there are a lot of different products available. I've seen the past few years of working in Ohio that a lot of customers are still very comfortable with fixed price, full swing. But as you've seen, that can give you a lot of price stability, but that price stability comes with a cost, and that cost is paying risk premiums to the supplier. When I think a lot of the customers I've talked to, especially a lot of the larger ones, there are a lot of other options available in terms of indexing and managing the price risk in a more active way than just taking a passive approach to doing it and going out for RFP every 2 or 3 years and fixing everything up. There's also a lot of premium put into things like full swing service. A lot of customers say, I have to have that, I just have to have it. But their usage doesn't vary more than 5 or 10% on any given month, and they're really paying for insurance that they don't need. So just in conclusion, we encourage you to think about all the different product options that are available, talk with suppliers, see the different things that are available. There's a lot more opening up lately, especially things that also bring in demand response elements into the contract, and I think there's a much more active way to manage the power costs and the power risks to get both budget certainty or enough budget certainty for what you need, as well as some flexibility to get some lower costs. So, that, and also in terms of just where the market is going right now, I think we're at a relatively low point. Again, we saw the market peak a couple of months ago. It's fallen back off here lately, both on gas and power. There may be a little bit more downside, but we're just getting into the summer now. If we see a hot spell come around or an active hurricane season develop, we could see the market turn right back around and go back up. But in general, I think we're back in a relatively good trading range for users of energy, and that's because of the shale gas production that has come into play over the last 5 years and really increased the amount of energy this continent has. So all things to weigh in and talk about with suppliers and build out. I think you're best to build out a very thoughtful risk management strategy when it comes to energy. Moving to the next slide. Again, I think I've covered a lot of this, so I think we can move on, frankly, to that final slide. Just the last couple of remarks about Suez. We've been in retail energy markets, including PJM, for more than 10 years at this point. We've got one of the best back offices in the business, very efficient processes and services, and a wide variety of products and risk management tactics to meet your needs. So, and then underpinning all of that is the company's A credit rating, which I think stands out in the industry. So, with that, we will conclude the planned portion of the presentation and move now into answering the questions. So, I will read the questions off as I've got them here on the screen, and either answer them myself or pass them along to to one of the other presenters here today. So if you have more questions, please continue to submit them, and we'll address them as time allows. First question we got in was very early, just asking, do any of the utilities have announced rate increases for 2013 and 2014? In general, the three of the four utilities have electricity stability plans or ESP plans that are in place and have been approved out through 2015 or so. The exception is Dayton Power and Light. Their old ESP expired at the end of last year, and they've been in front of the PUCO really for almost a year now with that case going back and forth. So that we're still waiting the outcome of that. We may see some price increases coming in the Dayton territory as a result of that. And also one thing to note, as I pointed out earlier on the slide regarding transmission and ancillaries, Dayton is a market where transmission and some of the ancillaries are the responsibility of the CREST supplier. One thing they have in their current ESP filing as it's written is a request to move NITs and some of those ancillaries over to non-bypassables. So that's something to be watching in that market and be aware of. We continue to include it. You've got the option to pass through transmission. If that ESP passes as they've asked and some of those do become non-bypassables, we will back those costs out of your price and make a price adjustment at that time. But if you're in Dayton territory and you're comparing supplier offers, make sure you understand how the suppliers are treating those NITs and ancillary costs that could become non-bypassables once that case is passed, which I expect probably in the next month or two. One thing to note, even though these ESPs on the other utilities are currently approved through 2015, they do have a fuel adjustment clause to many of them, and in AEP in particular, we've seen some substantial increases in that fuel adjustment clause over the past 6 months. So those fuel adjustments change, I think, quarterly, at least on some of the rates in AEP. So while we don't have any forward view as to where those are going, they do have a pretty strong case history in the past few months of increasing quarter on quarter and pretty substantially, to the point that there's, as probably many of you are aware, some pretty substantial headroom right now in the AEP territory. Moving on to the next question, how can companies and corporations take advantage of PJM's demand capacity market, and is there a simple method to sell energy efficiency resources into PJM's market? So, we didn't really address demand response at all in this presentation, so I think it's good to note. One way to manage your capacity costs and potentially avoid a lot of them are through demand response activities. That does require that you work with a demand response curtailment services provider who's registered also with PJM. We are one, and we work as well with a number of curtailment service provider specialists to provide those products to our customers. And we can do that either, working with them, we can do that either through a demand response program where you sign up with PJM to curtail on their notice a specified amount of demand that you've committed to, or an alternative that I think is even a better way to go is working with a demand response provider to identify when those potential peak hours are going to occur, and simply curtailing yourself in those hours to avoid setting a high PLC by trying to avoid those 5 coincident peak hours. And I think we'll see that emerging as a lot more frequent operation. There's also ways to participate in the energy markets and get credit on the energy side for buying back, selling your committed power back into the market. And CSPs also may be able to provide or bid your energy efficiency resources into PJM market. That's something that we didn't want to address here today in detail because that could take another several hours of presentation. So, but definitely be working and talking to those CSPs if that's something that interests you, and I think it's a good way to go. Mike, do you have anything to add on that capacity element?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, great. Next question asked really about the LMP prices. Are you pulling the cost per megawatt hour a year from PJM, and you can tell me where to find that on their website. This, I think, refers back to the slide that we presented that showed the cost curve. There was an hourly price curve historically as well as historic averages. So we calculated those averages off of PJM data. And just by way of reference, if you go to PJM's website, on their splash page, you do see at the bottom right corner the current hour real-time price and day-ahead price. And then if you go to the Markets and Operations tab and then on the left-hand side select Energy Market, you can go into day-ahead energy or real-time energy markets and pull up historical data. Now, they present that historical data on a daily basis, so you've got to download a spreadsheet for every single day. We make that easier for you by pulling that data into one spreadsheet that you can download off of our website. So if you go to the GDF Suez website and go into our market price history tabs, you can actually download selected time frames that you want to study and download the hourly prices into a CSV file. We also allow you to download daily averages, monthly averages, et cetera. So we're pulling that data in and giving you guys some opportunity to analyze and pull it down yourselves. So I would recommend going to our site instead of trying to pull down daily data from PJM. Next question involves NITS. Question comes in that didn't the NITS price for AEP change to $32,035 per megawatt year? Our slide showed it as $27,431 per megawatt year. I'm not. The price we've got is effective June 1. That was published by PJM back in May. If it's been updated since then, I'm not aware of it. So if it has changed, we'll research that and get that changed when we put the presentation back up. One thing to note, though, I have seen other suppliers using different prices for their quote-unquote transmission pass-through. And what we've figured out is those suppliers, while you think they claimed it was transmission, they're actually moving some of the ancillary services into that transmission bucket and passing through ancillary services with it. So whereas I've seen customers go out for RFPs, say, yeah, fix my ancillaries but pass through transmission. And I've seen one supplier come in 50 cents or $1 a megawatt hour below everybody else and therefore win the deal, but then come back and put those costs into their transmission pass-through. So that's something to dig into if that's where that quote's coming from. So, but if that price has been updated by PJM, we'll make sure to get that out there as well. Next question asked about RPS and what's included in the RPS charge that PJM puts into ancillary services. PJM actually doesn't do anything with RPS. RPS is something on a statewide basis, so putting that into ancillaries is really something Suez does. Some suppliers may hold that out as a separate charge, separate from ancillaries. We just bundle it into ancillaries as a place to put it. But basically the states require a certain percentage of the supplier generation to come from renewable sources, and it's defined differently in every state. And so that's something that we put into our ancillary curve just as a place to put it. Other suppliers, like I said, may put it in different places. But you're right, that's not really a PJM-specific charge. Next question asks about risk premiums. How is the risk premium for a low-risk product built into the price? Is there a quantifiable risk premium per kilowatt hour charge added into the rate? Mike, do you want to take a crack at that one? If not, I can.
I'm trying to see the question. Hold on.
Okay. It's number 12, or ID 12.
Yes, maybe you could take it, David.
Okay, sure. The risk premiums that are being put in there are, it really depends on what is asked by the customer to be fixed versus what is what might float. So that risk premium is something that really is a matter of art and calculation by each supplier's supply desk, taking into account the risk that cost might change, or if it's something that covers risk that load usage may change. It's really going to look at how does the customer's energy change over time. So I can't give you any specific thing more than that, other than it all depends on what the element is and how much volatility either the cost structure is that goes below that, or potentially the energy structure is in the customer's usage. So I hope that answered that question adequately. Next question involves energy blocks. Can energy blocks be purchased as limit orders? It's not something that GDF Suez is offering right now. The difficulty on the power side with a limit order that would basically say, hey, for instance, if the price gets to $35, I want to execute 10 megawatts round the clock for calendar 2014, just like you might with a stock. It's difficult on the power side because power does not trade in an open cry pit the way gas and stocks do, and so there's not a place where we can go to send that order. The way we hedge typically is bilaterally. So when we're going out looking for a specific hedge, we're going out to several wholesale suppliers and asking for prices and then hedging them. So what we do for customers that are interested in doing that, I guess there's one of two ways to do it. One would be we could set some strike prices or target prices, and then when those are reached, we will reach out to you and say, we've reached your target price, would you like to go ahead and execute that? And then if you agree, then we pay for the deal. The other way to do it, if you truly want to have limit orders in place, we can talk about going to a heat rate product where power is actually indexed to gas, and then we can set up limit orders on the gas side to execute on the natural gas side. So those are two ways that we can do that. Next question, is there a minimum demand or load required by Suez to be my supplier? Right now in Ohio, we're only addressing customers that are considered mercantile customers by the state, and so that limit is at 700 megawatt hours per year and up, so we can really work with anybody larger than that. Suez is also working on launching, and we have launched in many states, we just haven't launched in Ohio yet, a mass market brand called Think Energy, and they will be serving that smaller non-mercantile segment in Ohio below 700 megawatt hours per year. So that should be coming hopefully by I think later this year. We'll launch Think Energy and as a brand in that market. Next question asks, does GDF Suez plan to move into the ATSI market anytime soon? We've been there for 3 years, so and been serving load there for that time. So yeah, we're already in the First Energy territories behind ATSI in Ohio, as well as across all of First Energy's territories in Pennsylvania. Next question. What does the timeline for natural gas export look like for the next 3 years? How will this impact the energy market in comparison to other factors, drilling reduction, coal plant reduction? That's an interesting question. And actually, I think if you want an even deeper discussion on it, go to our website and look up the presentation done by, in our second quarter national presentation, where Andy Weissman, who's a national expert on energy matters, was our guest. And he talks quite a bit about this. But, as you allude to here, there's a couple of, right now, 2 LNG export terminals that have been approved by the federal government. Cheniere is one in Sabine Pass, and then there's a second one that I'm forgetting where that one is. I think it's in Texas for export, and yeah, that will have an impact. I don't think it's going to have that significant an impact in price, though, until we get to there being a lot of export terminals, and 2 is, I don't think, enough at this point. And I say that because I think there's enough shale finds now, and it's easy enough to access that I think we'll continue to be able to meet demand without seeing serious spikes in gas cost, and therefore driving power costs anytime soon. Obviously, it is part of the equation, and it all goes into the mix on what's going on in the economy, what's going on with coal plant retirements, fuel switching between gas and power, as well as drilling activities. So I don't think that's uniquely going to cause a big problem, but it's all part of the mix. Another question on slide 25 regarding range of outcomes on fixed products. What are the causes of variability? That's a good question. On a fixed price product, the price may be fixed, but even if you have full swing, it's based on consumption. So the question is, where does your consumption change? So in terms of a budget outcome, even though the price is fixed, the energy is going to be dependent and move up and down, and may affect that. So that's why we're showing even at a fixed price product, there can be a range of outcomes as compared to your budget. There's also the possibility for change in law on contracts and changes in tariff that end up resulting in changes in cost. So we want to take that into account. And actually, the next item I see is a question that was asked earlier that we have an answer to, and one of our marketing manager, Kevin Stafford, has come up with an answer to the NITS question regarding AEP, and it appears that, yes, as of June 24th, there is a new NITS price in AEP, and that is $32,035.25 per megawatt year. So we stand corrected, and thank you for asking that. And Kevin, thanks for doing that quick research and getting the right result. So as we post the webinar and the web on our the presentation on our website, we'll get that corrected. And then I think we need to wind down here. So, trustees, two last questions, and then I think we'll call it a day. Questions have been asked: isn't heat rates only applicable to Texas? And the answer to that is no. I think there may be many suppliers that only offer it in Texas, but GDF Suez is one supplier that has broad heat rate contracts, and by that I mean contracts where power is indexed to gas instead of hourly LMP. We offer those across all of our regions, including PJM, and I think it's quite an interesting and exciting product to offer in a place like Ohio, where there is an ample gas supply there locally to use in hedging that. And we have several hundred megawatts of load in PJM that is on heat rate products, and a lot of those customers have done very well. We've had customers that are paying in the 2 to 3 cent per kilowatt hour range on their power costs because they have indexed to gas instead of power. That product is relatively complex. Again, our website has descriptions of it. I've talked about it at some of the Manufacturers Education Council meetings in Ohio. There's one coming up on that here in the fall. We'll talk about it again there. So I would encourage you to think about that product and talk with us in more detail if that's something that interests you. Last question I'll address is when you pass through capacity cost, is it just the RPM price times the capacity tag, or do you adjust for zonal scaling factor and FPR? And the FPR is forecast pool requirements. And absolutely, as the slide showed, we do basically we're billing the obligation. So we take the PLC, the peak load contribution that's set by the utility, and we do scale it up by the zonal scaling factor and forecast pool requirement, which adds, depending on the zone, 15 to 20% to that tag to get it to an obligation, and then we do apply that to the RPM price. And so we did show that on that slide. So thanks for pointing that out and just allowing us to reiterate that level of detail. So I think with that, we're already 10 minutes past our allotted time. So appreciate everyone's attention. We had very good attendance today. We're very happy that everyone was able to join us, and I encourage you all to think about us next time you go out for an RFP. And as I said, we never like to end our webinars without mentioning that we want to hear from our participants. You will be receiving a survey, and we encourage you to take 5 minutes of your time to provide us with input on how we did today and feedback on what you'd like Suez to provide in future webinars to come. So once it's available, you'll also receive a link to today's webinar, and as you see on the screen, there is a link to go to the SurveyMonkey site to give us feedback on today's webinar. So appreciate everyone's attendance and attention for the past hour plus, and look forward to talking with you all in the future. That's a wrap. Thank you very much.
That does conclude our conference for today. Thank you for your participation.